Introducing you. Whoops. Okay, recording in progress. Good. I'm very happy to introduce Rees Hughes, who's author of Hiking Humboldt, 101 shorter day hikes, urban and road walks, and Crossing Paths, a Pacific Crest Trailside Reader. He helps coordinate the Volunteer Trail Stewards program, serves on the board of the Bigfoot Trail Association, is a member of the Bay Trail Fund Committee, and is writing Hiking Humboldt for Kids and Families, hopefully available this month. The Volunteer Trail Stewards works on trails in 10 locations in the area. That's been expanded substantially. Volunteers build, maintain, and serve as eyes and ears on these trails. We're always looking for new volunteers. You can just get in contact with Rees. And Rees, it's all yours. Thank you for coming.
Great. Now I'm going to screen share because I have a PowerPoint. So let's see if I can make that happen quickly.
And Rees, before you get started, I forgot to mention, if you do have questions today throughout the presentation, you can just put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand. If there's a good break, we'll call on you to ask your question at that time. But the chat is the best way to put your questions forward. And Rees is going to save time at the end of the presentation for more questions and more discussion.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, OLLI. Thank you, all of you, for being part of this morning or this noon. My plan is to talk about a number of hikes. No longer am I attaching a specific number to this because I'm going to talk about a lot of local hikes and drives that should be appropriate both for spring and summer. And I would encourage you to take notes, and if you have the wisdom to have a copy of Hiking Humboldt, that would be a good thing to pull out, because I'll try to make reference to specific hikes so that you could flip over and see a little bit more detail if you want, or write on that page if that would make sense for you. As Kim said, my preference would be to have you save most of your questions until the end, although put them in the chat, and Kim will share them with me if they're germane to a particular hike that we're talking about right now. So let's see here. I wanted to start this particular presentation with a land acknowledgement. It feels very appropriate given the nature of this talk being about walking throughout the county, because we are blessed with a county that has such stunning and beautiful lands and landscapes, but they all have belonged in the past and have been stewarded by indigenous nations that include the Hoopa, Karuk, Matol, Wailaki, Yurok, Wiyot peoples. And I'm very appreciative to the stewardship that they have provided for many years and continue to provide for these lands. I also want to say that I'm personally in a learning state. I'm trying to learn more and more about the role of, in particular, place names. And I'm trying in a small way to unlearn some of my past use of place names like Mad River, and I'm trying to replace it with Badawat. It's a work in progress. Instead of Elk River, trying to use Hikshari. Instead of Humboldt Bay and the people around Humboldt Bay, to use Wiki or Wiki, and Tulawat instead of Indian Island, and Wiyot instead of the Eel River. At the bottom of this particular slide, you see a URL for, and I would encourage you to go follow up and listen to it. It's a short video with a native Wiyot speaker that gives you the correct pronunciation for each of these particular place names. And I think it's part of an easy way to start to honor the role of native peoples in our landscape. Well, 2023 brings some very exciting developments, not the least of which is the first one I mentioned here, which is the 4.2 miles of the Humboldt Bay Trail between what I call two rocks at the end of Humboldt Bay Trail North and Eureka, the Eureka Slough area. So it will go from Braycut along the bay side of the old Arcata Redwood Mill into Eureka over the Eureka Slough Bridge. And that contractor will break ground mid-May of this year, and it will take about 2 building seasons. So it's a very complicated project that will involve, among other things, removing the rails and rebuilding the trail prism, the rail prism, to provide more protection. It will involve doing some removal of some of the eucalyptus. It will involve building new bridges. It's a variety of things. So by 2024, the hope is that that will be complete between all the way from the skate park in Arcata to the end of the new trail, which I'll talk about in a moment, that goes south to Humboldt Hill, which will be about 15.5 miles total. Progress is being made on the Beta Zoo Trail. There's planning money involved with that, and the Annie and Merrick Trail that goes from the skate park in Arcata out to the pump station number 1. The Centennial Trail in Redwood National Park, which will connect Berry Glen Trail to the future site of the Redwood National Park Visitor Center. It is scheduled to be done by the end of 2023, this Centennial Trail, and then a connector trail that will go up to the Grove up above Lady Bird Johnson Grove area, should be done by 2024. So that's exciting stuff. And then this picture, I just recently took this, is the 1 mile extension that's been completed. It's a class 1 trail that goes from the Hickshari Trail to Humboldt Hill. The 4.5 mile long Arcata Ridge Trail is open and complete. Right now, the most recent link, the 1/3 of a mile from the south side of the Fickle Hill Road to into Sunny Brae Forest, is temporarily closed until it dries out, but the trail itself is complete and will be reopened again. We're going to do a little bit more rocking this summer to try to make it more all-weather. And about a year ago, work began on some of the 31 miles of trails that will be in the McKay Community Forest. We've been focusing on the areas around Redwood Acres and around the existing trailhead at the sort of Ridgewood area in the Cutton area. All right, before I begin talking about specific trails, it's important to acknowledge that this has been a winter like no others in recent memory. The winds, the earthquakes, the continued cold and snow at low levels have delayed a lot of the spring blooms. So flowers are postponed some from what they normally would be. Perhaps even more significantly, trail and road conditions have suffered. I was talking with somebody from Redwood National Park. They have experienced a lot of downed trees, and they are trying to get in there to clear some of the trails. So I'm not always current on all of that. So some of the trails that I talk about may be impacted by some of the winter storm damage. We can only hope that this will diminish fire risk for this coming year, but I don't think there's any guarantee. One of the things that happens with all of this growth that's stimulated by the wet winter and wet spring is that if we have a hot and dry summer, we'll be back into the midst of having a lot of fuel for summer fires if that happens. So no guarantee that the wet winter will result in a smoke-free summer. Well, I always want to start and include this slide because we live in such an amazing place. And I also, even though I'm going to focus on trails, I also want to mention that there are 1,300 miles of public paved roads in Humboldt County and unpaved roads in Humboldt County. And I will talk about some of those that I think are really special and um, worth taking advantage of. And I'm also going to talk about some road trips, especially a great time to go out and see spring wildflowers. Get out for a day and go visit some of the more remote areas in Humboldt County. We also have more coastline than any other county in the state of California. We have 110 miles of coastline, and it is wonderful to have that at our disposal. And more than any other place, we also have acres of redwood forests included in some of the 8 state parks that we have in Humboldt County. I always include this picture of John Palmquist because I love the sign. He and I were up walking out the Elk River area some years ago and came across this sign, which I think is so appropriate. But I use this as a chance to say that I'm not going to talk about some of the most familiar trails to all of us. I'm not going to really talk about the Waterfront Trail, Hickshari Trail, Bay Trail North that much, Sunny Brave Forest, Hammond Trail, Sumag Village, because I'm hoping most of you know those trails. And I'm not really going to include urban walks, although they can be some of the most beautiful walks and interesting walks during this time as well. But in many cases, they're more familiar to all of us. So I'm going to focus on some of the others. I want to start with the Humboldt Bay Wildlife Refuge. And this, for those of you that are following along in your Hiking Humboldt Volume 2 book, really is hike number 46 and hike number 47 in that book. The Shorebird Loop Walk is a flat 1.75 mile long walk that is for the most part accessible to ADA state park standards, which means it's hard packed, flat and level, hard packed enough that most and many wheelchairs can use those trails. It is a wonderful place to see the goose population, although many of those have started their migration north at this point, although we do have a fairly large now resident population. It's open 8 to 5 daily. The other option, which I find actually even more interesting in some ways, is the Hooked and Slough. It's a 3-mile round trip that goes from the parking area along the levee. So it too is meets ADA state park standards. It's not paved, but it's hard packed surface for the first 1.5 miles. And then there's an interesting phenomenon for those of you that have been out in this area in a minus tide. It is the only area in the entirety of Humboldt Bay where in low tide you can actually go out onto the flats. There's a sandy enough content that it's not the typical mud base. I think I've got a picture here coming up. We've got several pictures I should go through. This picture on the left is the Hooked and Slough levee walk. So you can see how it's hard packed. Often when I'm out there, there's a resident population of river otters, and it's a great place to at least have the potential to see a river otter. This is the sandy area. You can extend for another mile past the 1.5 miles of the formal Hooked and Slough. You have to leave the levee, and you can walk along for another mile out to the site of the old Southport Landing, which in the 1870s had a half-mile long wharf that went out where there was shallow draft boats that were loaded from the home and the loading area for Charles Henley. And his home still exists as Southport Landing sort of a accommodation, which was for a while a bed and breakfast. It is no longer that, but it's a beautiful home that you can see as you go out on Table Bluff. So here's a picture of Alaskan Aleutian cackling geese and the fly-off that happened through the month of March. Okay, I'm going to shift next to talk a little bit about Samoa dunes and wetlands. This is not one that's in the book, although there are a number of Samoa Peninsula walks, which I'll talk about a little bit, and those are hikes 31 through 35. And this is a picture of one of the parabolic dunes in the Samoa Dunes and Wetlands area, which is a moving dune, and then the larger plant community that's adjacent to that. This is a map of the Samoa wetlands and dunes. And it's useful to have this map, which I'll talk about how you can download this map in a moment. And this gives you a little view of what the trails look like on the forest side of the Samoa wetlands and dunes. This, one of the things I would suggest is that you consider installing the Avenza Maps app. It's a free app on your smartphone if you have a smartphone, and that you can use that. It overlays the map. If you can download the map at the Friends of the Dunes website, and it will overlay that with on Avenza so that it geolocates exactly where you are on the trail system. And it's a great way to make sure that you don't get lost out there. This picture is Humboldt Bay wallflower, which is a flower that's in bloom right now out on the Four Dunes, and a wonderful flower and plant. The Humboldt Bay wallflower is in fact an endangered species, but it's very showy right now, this time of the year. There are a number of other options in addition to the small wetlands and dunes. My favorite walk is the walk that I will highlight here in a moment, from the Humboldt Bay Nature Center all the way down south. It's about a 4.5 mile walk down to the Malel Dunes North area. One of the drawbacks of this walk is that you cannot take any dogs. The dogs are allowed on the Malel North or South area, but not in the North area. So it is a limitation. But here's the walk itself. And I like it because it gives you a little of everything. You explore not only the nature center, you have a wonderful walk along the hard-packed dune surface. Then you go up through the high dunes and then along the Mad River Slough and back on the hard-packed road that was at one point part of the Hammond Railroad system, and then back along the Waterline Trail and back through the Nature Center. But there are a number of other options available through the Nature Center, Humboldt Friends of the Dunes trail system, and then from the Manila Community Center, there are a whole additional set of trails that you can follow. Just be prepared. There are bathrooms at Malel North here. There are bathrooms at the Nature Center. There's a bathroom at Malel South, and there's bathrooms at Manila Community Center. It's great walking throughout the year, but there are a lot of reasons to go out there now and take advantage of some of the blooming plants. Another couple of pictures to appreciate. This is the picture from the Malel Malel North parking lot, which is open only from Friday through Monday. So it's not open Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And it is also the site where there just has recently been a dedication of this area, the Malel area and the Lamphere area, as one of 3 new national natural landmarks. And I have a picture of the dedication plaque. There's an official dedication that will be happening in the middle of May, this May, to acknowledge this designation. But it's pretty neat. It's not quite a national monument, but it does provide some special access and protection. Another picture from one of my favorite view spots out over the Mad River Slough area from Malel, the high dunes of Malel North.
Hey, Reese, there's a couple quick questions for you.
Sure.
One question was about the flower that you shared, and it asked if the Samoa dunes will be overwhelmed with vegetation over time, and then how do you identify when Malel North starts and when you have to turn around?
They're pretty distinct, because in between Malel North and Malel South is the gun club, which is basically off limits, and there is a distinct parking area for Malel South and a distinct parking area for Malel North. So that's probably the best way. And the other question was about being overwhelmed by with the vegetation.
What was the little yellow flower that you showed?
Oh, that's called the Humboldt Bay wallflower.
Right.
And they're very showy right now with the very distinctive yellow blooms, but they and I think in most cases I would encourage people to stay on established trails and not to roam too far off of the established trails. In the high dunes, it's okay where there's not existing vegetation, but in some of the fore dunes where there has been dune growth, plant growth, then you'll see some of these. Just try to stay on the trails. That's all I would advise.
My question was, will the Samoa dunes overwhelm the vegetation over time or vice versa? And how rapidly do they actually spread?
You know, one of the things that's been happening over the last 20 years really has been a concerted effort to remove a lot of the non-native species, primarily European beach grass, ice plant. And with the removal of those, it's sort of opened up for the repopulation of some of the native species. And the best place to view some of that is at the Friends of the Dunes. They've been particularly aggressive about removing some of the non-native species, and you can see where the native plants have returned. I don't know, Jane, if that answers your question.
No, my question is, in many places on Earth, the dunes are moving and overtaking the planted area. Is that actually happening there?
Well, part of the nature of the whole dunes area and parabolic dunes is that they're intended to be moving. They're not intended to be static. So healthy dunes are moving dunes. So there is a natural process of dune movement. And so some of the places in Malel North, you see it in the Samoa wetlands and dunes area, you'll see some of the high dunes enveloping some of the trees. That's actually not a totally a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's part of the natural process. Because then what happens is that some of the areas get scoured out down to the water table, and some of the coastal pines populations get reestablished there. So it's part of the healthy dune habitat and process.
Do they ever move out toward the ocean and replenish the beach?
Well, yeah, certainly that's part of the process as well. A lot of the source of the sand that repopulates the sand on the beach comes from rivers, so Mad River, Klamath River, Eel River, all of those have a heavy sediment load, and that provides sort of the ingredients over time for the sand that repopulates the dunes and the beaches locally.
It's interesting because I thought the sediment coming down the river was sediment from tree cutting and, soils, not
Some
sand.
of that certainly is, but it is also the source of sand. I mean, you have to look at this in geologic time frames. So it really is based a lot on just over hundreds and hundreds of years. The source of the sand on the coast started in many cases inland. So when we get agates at Agate Beach, for example, those are typically sourced inland, and they've just made their way over time to the coast. Same
I
with
had no idea. That's fascinating.
yeah,
Thank you very much.
sure. So let's talk about spring in the Coast Range. This is a great time to take a road trip to some of these places and take advantage by getting out and doing some walking. And I'm going to talk about these four in particular: the Dyerville Loop Road and Fort Stewart Walk, the Neyland to Bridgeville Road, and out of that are two wonderful walks, the Mountain View Road and the Redwood House Road. And each of those are mentioned in Hiking Humboldt. I'll talk about those independently. So the first one is the Dyerville Loop Road. I would encourage you to take a full day to do this. Pick a nice day, maybe not today, but a nice day like we had this past week. This could be absolutely spectacular. So you go south on 101 all the way down towards Camp Grant Flat, or there's several other places where you can access the Dyerville Loop Road. And then you go on south to Fort Seward. And Fort Seward is hike number 100 in Hiking Humboldt. It also can give you a little more explicit road directions. In that same area is a chance to walk along the Dyerville Loop Road. This is a unpaved road with very little traffic on it. And it's on the Mail Ridge. It's a high ridge in between the main stem of the Eel River and the South Fork of the Eel River. From Fort Stewart, you would take that on potentially east through old Lassick communities. The Lassick Mountains are the only remaining evidence really of the Lassick peoples in this area. Blocksburg and on back to Bridgeville and home. And I have a couple pictures, I think. So this gives you a little sense. The Fort Seward walk goes from the high point along the Dyerville Loop Road. It goes down, down, down. You drop about 2,000 vertical feet down to the old Fort Seward Railroad Depot and the bridge crossing of the main stem of the Eel River. It goes through this massive Fort Seward Ranch, which is this 27,000 acre ranch, and it's open range, as you can see from the picture up here, and you have spectacular views in both directions in many cases. Here's a view down from the walk itself down to the main stem of the Eel River. This is a picture of the Fort Seward Railroad Station that's down in the little community of Fort Seward, where there used to be a pretty up and going hotel. I every once in a while run into people that would take one of the tourist trains down to Fort Seward and back. And this is another bit of evidence of the old Lassick and native population, Nongadal people in this area. The Neeland to Bridgeville Road. It's again a great spring drive. I'm going to advance and then see if I can come back. So this is another one that I would encourage you to allocate a full day for. Starting again, I just arbitrarily started from Eureka. It's not that long mileage wise, but the road is slow going from basically Neeland all the way to Bridgeville. Again, unpaved throughout this distance, with two walks that I would encourage you to consider. One is a flatter walk along they're both relatively flat, Mountain View Road, which is hike number 83 in the book, or the Redwood House Road, which extends from the Bridgeville to Neeland Road, and it goes this way. It actually ends up all the way down connecting with Highway 36, but I usually recommend just the upper part. And that is, again, an unpaved road through ranch land. It's open range, goes along Yager Creek. It's a wonderful area. It's hike 98 in the in Hiking Humboldt. So let's see if I can back. So this goes basically, this is Mountain View Road going from Neeland Airport, where you can park, and there's a porta potty there, and it goes along Mountain View Road, again, an unpaved road, open range, great place to sort of escape from when the fog starts to come in down here along the coast. You get a view like this. This is the road going along the Mountain View Road from the airport. And this is what I like to escape. I always credit Mark Larson. He's provided some wonderful pictures. Thank you, Mark, for that. And then the Redwood House Road. Again, this is what the road looks like. Again, it's a little used. It's a county road with no fencing on either side, goes along Yager Creek. And there's about 4 miles that basically goes from the junction with the Bridgeville to Neeland Road, going west along Yager Creek. And I like the upper part. It does continue all the way down, goes all the way down to Highway 36, but I like this upper area. And you just park alongside the road in a pullout. And it's, again, ranch land, typically owned by the Russ family. And whenever I've been up there and have been stopped, I just explain what I'm doing. Sometimes they want to ask you a little bit more about why you're there, and I just explain, because it is a county road, just to be clear. Okay, let's move on to some low tide walks. Another thing that is wonderful in this time of the year, the early May, early June low tides. So I'm going to talk about the Huda Point to Moonstone Walk. I'm going to talk about the Centerville Beach to Fleener and Guthrie Creeks. And I'm going to talk about the mouth of the Matola, a little more difficult walk to Punta Gorda. So the first one, Huda Point to Moonstone, is a wonderful low tide walk. This is a view of that. And minus times are the best time to do these walks. As we sort of alluded to in the question Jane asked, the sand movement and changes, every year it's a little different depending on how harsh the winter has been. Sometimes there's been a lot more beach erosion than other years. The sand doesn't go away permanently. It goes offshore, and it sort of sits in sandbars offshore until the summer tides and winds gradually redeposit sand onshore. So sand and beach levels can change pretty dramatically over time. This particular walk can be done as a loop. Sometimes you have to be prepared a little bit to get wet. There's a portable toilet at Moonstone Beach. And this is a view from Huda Point, looking south towards Clam Beach and Moonstone Beach on this particular walk. And I think it's one of my favorites, can be one of my absolute favorites in the low tide, minus tide time period. So take careful note of this. There are tide tables that you can get online. You can watch the papers, but some to be alert to. Not all minus tide times are great because they often require really early morning starts. So I picked out some of the ones that are a little bit more at respectable times for those of you that don't get up particularly early. There's some coming up May 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th and 10th at reasonable times. Then later May and then early June and mid-June. And one of the reasons they happen now is because those of you that follow tides, the sun, because we're getting to the point where the longer days of the northern and the northern hemisphere and the full moons coincide, and that means we have even bigger tides than during the fall and spring time period. So it's a great time to take advantage of that and do some of these low tide walks. So another cautionary tale, this is based on Trinidad, but tides vary. So if you're thinking about looking at a walk Humboldt Bay or mouth of the Eel or some of the other areas, mouth of the other areas, you'd want to make sure that you keep this in mind because they vary from the Trinidad harbor times by as much as 50 minutes. So here's the Huda Point loop. I like to park at Huda Point and take one of the stairway options down, which is one of the dicier parts of the walk. And then this sort of shows that the tide's low. You can go out around towards Camel Rock and then follow the beach south towards Moonstone Beach. If you want to make it a loop, you go up and then follow Scenic Drive past this, go all the way along Scenic Drive past the site of the old Hollywood area with a good viewpoint out over Moonstone Beach south and up to Trinidad, and then end up at the parking area. Some great tide pooling in this area. And another area that I love is the Centerville Beach to Fleener Creek Loop, or all the way down and to Guthrie Creek and south. Again, this is hike 53, that area in the book. This has so many dimensions that make it of interest. There are also some fossil-bearing mud consolidated cliffs at the south end of the Fleener, north end of Fleener Creek area, south end of Centerville Beach, and a lot of these old scallops, giant Pacific scallop fossils that you can find along the beach in this area. And it makes an interesting low tide. This is on farther south, all the way to past Guthrie Creek for almost a mile beyond that. And this is what it looks like during low tide. Lots of beach erosion from these very sandy cliffs. That's where some of the consolidated mud cliffs is where you will get fossils, and it's quite fascinating. It's also the site up above of the old naval listening post, which is now a picnic area, and makes for a nice additional stop. This is Fleener Creek Trail access. Guthrie Creek doesn't look that different right now. The drop into Guthrie Creek is a little precipitous, so you have to be careful with the erosion that's occurred both of these places. Sometimes it can be a little more difficult to get to the beach. But if you stay along the beach and are going from Centerville all the way down, it's fairly good as long as you're monitoring the tide situation. So here's a picture graphically of a map of the parking area at Centerville Beach. There's also parking here at the Fleener Creek parking area or the Guthrie Creek parking area. and trails down to the beach. Again, this is where there's a little bit of a dicey interchange from this trail down to the beach itself. Same with Fleener Creek. This was a hard winter on both of those transitional points. So staying on the beach all the way down during low tide can be a fantastic walk. But if you can make it a loop and go up from Fleener Creek here to there's a place where you can sort of go on trails, or you don't have to go on the road, over to the old site of the listening post, which is now this. There's also bathrooms there, and then walk the final 2/3 of a mile back to the parking area on the little used Centerville Beach Road. Another view from the very south end of this beach walk, and a minus tide. Another walk that I like in this area, if you don't go during low tide, is Pool Road. The access to Pool Road is about a 1/3 of a mile towards, let's see, how to best describe it. 1/3 of a mile before you get to the Centerville Beach. So you're coming from Ferndale, and you would end up 1/3 of a mile before you get to Centerville, and to the beach area is Pool Road. And it is a county road. And a number of the roads that I use this because there are a number of signs like this throughout the county on county roads that are sort of unfriendly, but you have to sort of be clear with the landowner if you're ever questioned, because these are maintained by the public. They're maintained poorly oftentimes, but maintained by the county. And there is a county right-of-way. You just have to make sure that you, often going from the center line of the road to generally to where the drainage begins. So you don't want to get too far off the road, but don't always be intimidated by these signs. They make
Reese, there's a couple questions in the chat, if that's okay.
what? Let me look on the chat. Well, let's see, Maggie, when I said dicey, what stretch was I referring to? Oh, it's probably going off of Huda Point.
You've used it a couple different times in different places, and so I just wanted to make sure. Does that just mean that it's, rocks and the flat part of the trail is disturbed and fallen apart?
Yeah, so I think the two places that I should describe a little bit more in detail what it really looks like. One is coming off of Huda Point and going down to Lufenholtz Beach, and then on south to Moonstone Beach. The trail off of Huda Point, there are several options, and you just need to be careful. And oftentimes the winter beach erosion erodes the lower parts of those. So that I know that there was a recent workday from the Trinidad Coastal Land Trust trying to do some restoration of some of the lower parts of that particular stretch, but you have to be somewhat careful. The other place I might have used dicey was a transition from the two Centerville beach areas. Let's see, I'll just go quickly back, maybe.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right here, Fleener Creek. I was there just fairly recently, and it's not too bad. But at Guthrie Creek, there's a little bit more of a precipitous drop off between the beach and the creek and the trail. And so those two areas that's why I was recommending perhaps that you choose as your avenue of choice to take a low tide walk along Centerville Beach down this way, past the fossil bearing cliffs, past Fleener Creek, past Guthrie Creek if you want to. Then Jane asked the question about how long does low tide stay low tide? Well, I think that most of the tide tables will give you a sense as to how long, but I usually think an hour before and an hour after is not unsafe, especially if you're looking at minus tides. So I'd say an hour before, hour after, not too bad. I wouldn't, especially down in these areas where there are some no passes at higher tide levels. You don't want to be too risky.
So if I'm parking on the right side at Centerville Beach, how far is it down to where I get to Centerville Road coming
So
down?
this is about a mile, and
Oh,
this
it's
is
about a mile, so that's not
about a
that far. And if you go all the way to the end on the
to the
left,
Guthrie Creek. That's about maybe another mile.
okay,
So a couple miles that way. You'd definitely have time.
great, thank you.
Going farther beyond, you just need to probably be a little bit careful. Punta Gorda and Windy Point. I love this walk, but it is a little more of a challenging walk. This is taken from Windy Point itself. This is the mouth here of the Mattole River. So this hike goes from the mouth of the Mattole down to the lighthouse at Punta Gorda. Part of what makes that difficult is the sand's sort of soft, and the wind can be intense if you're coming back north. It's usually a northwestern wind. So it's Windy Point for a reason, and this is also windy along the beach. But it's particularly interesting right now because there is a elephant seal population near the Punta Gorda Lighthouse. And I think that makes it really a fascinating walk. And here's part of the walk past 4 Mile Creek. And you can see the lighthouse in the distance here. This is obviously not in springtime. This picture was taken. But here is 4 Mile Creek. There are a couple of inholdings there. And this is the lighthouse, which has just gone through a little renovation, and the elephant seal population is just down below the lighthouse. So don't go down there, don't approach them, but you can definitely see them from a safe vantage point up around the lighthouse area. So here's what the walk looks like. Parking at Mattole Beach, walking along there's an old Jeep trail along the first mile or so off and on. This is tough walking. It's sort of softer sand. And then you can start to get some advantages of being in a little firmer area the last mile or so from the 4 Mile Creek and a little bit before the 4 Mile Creek crossing. And here's the lighthouse and the elephant seal population. You can, if you have 4-wheel drive certain times of the year, this is a gated access, but there you can shorten the walk considerably by using your 4-wheel drive, coming down and parking here at Windy Point. There's a parking area right here, and it's a steep trail down to 4 Mile Creek, and it'll shorten it about 2 miles, 2.5 miles each way. So it does make it a lot easier, but this is not for standard cars, standard sedans.
There's a question in the chat.
Sure. Let's see. My low tides, not really. I think I would just Google what I do. I just Google low tides, usually Trinidad or Centerville Beach, and it'll come up with current low tide information, or you can also look for future dates. It is posted in the Time Standard, but they only post a couple of days before or after, and they give you a variety of locations. Sneaker waves, there's no good source because you never know when they're going to come, but summer is typically more benign than winter. But even in the summer, you want to be smart. And I usually advise you never to turn your back on waves. And if you're going to be closer to the foreshore and out walking along the water edges itself, you just got to be smart about that. This also is a wonderful, tough, long day drive, but it's a fascinating one going south through Ferndale up along the Wildcat. I've included a couple of pictures here. This is from Bear River Ridge area. Bear River itself goes through this area up over, this is Cape Mendocino, down along the Lost Coast itself to Petrolia. Here's a view along the Lost Coast of that area. And coming back along the Mattole itself, Honeydew through Humboldt Redwood State Park, and then back along 101 home. And it's again, I'd allocate a full day. This stretch of the road through Bull Creek was closed not long ago, but they have been working on reopening. It was down trees from the winter, but I just checked yesterday and this road was open. There have been some washouts along here, so it's graveled in some spots, but the road is open. It's worth checking the county just to make sure. You can just Google Humboldt County roads or road to Petrolia and probably get reasonably current information on that. It is a great spring drive and adventure. Ocean Ranch, Table Bluff, and this is hike number 9 in the book. This is out at the west end of Table Bluff. It's not a long drive. There's sort of a nice loop. The Fish and Wildlife has been doing a considerable amount of improvements in this area with a class 1 trail all the way out to McNulty Slough. Right now, the parking lot is only open here, but I'll show you a picture. But I'll picture in a moment. You can do a wonderful little loop here that gives you a little taste of the beach, and then up on the road to the edge of Table Bluff. This is where people often will, this is right here is the South Spit and South Jetty of Humboldt Bay on out for four more miles. This is where people hang glide. This is the site of the old lighthouse. It's a picnic area right now, and then back to the Ocean Ranch unit itself. And that's about a 2.7 mile loop, but there are lots of variations that you can take. This is just taken about a month ago down at the new facilities that are being put in the parking lot down at Ocean Ranch itself, down in this area where I said the new parking lot, picnic tables. It looks very barren, but they're replanting trees, and it's access to McNulty Slough and pretty fascinating new access area. And other pictures related to the walk. So this shows you Table Bluff from the air. This is McNulty Slough right here. And the walk now that comes down along the slough itself, hang gliding from Table Bluff, the old Table Bluff lighthouse site, and the contemporary little trail network along that area, along with the picnic tables. So it's a pretty fascinating, well worth an easy 2.7 mile walk with lots of possible choices that you can make. Lions Ranch Schoolhouse Peak. I keep hoping that this will be a banner year for lupin. This is a great place to go see lupin. Reports I've gotten lately, unless you have otherwise, that this is one of those areas that's certainly been a little delayed by our cold weather and long winter. This is a fascinating walk out to Lions Ranch, or for those of you that are a little bit more ambitious, you can take Coyote Creek for a little 8-mile walk. Lions Ranch is about a 4-mile walk. It's hike number 9 in the book. And this is along the Bald Hills Road going out towards Wichipec from the Oric area. And this gives you a little feeling for what it can be like during a wonderful lupin bloom. Here's my map. This shows you the parking area for, this is the parking area for Lions Ranch. It's part of Redwood National Park, so no dogs. It's again about a 2-mile trip out to the old ranch itself and the sheep shed. This is sheep shed, and then to the, I'm sorry, this is the recommended route I've included in the book. You can also go straight out and straight back, but it's about not too different distance-wise. This is a picnic area here. And then the other option is going up along Bald Hills Road to Schoolhouse Peak and doing some walking from that area. But magnificent views all the way along. There are a lot of bears in this area, and it's not unusual to see the resident elk herd that's in this area. So it is a magnificent drive/walk. Especially the wildflowers are out, but on a beautiful day, it can be just amazing. Here's some pictures of the old, this is the old Lions Ranch barn, and the walk down towards Lions Ranch itself, and some of the other plants that are going to be in bloom, but besides the lupin, the iris. This is the Coyote Creek option I mentioned, which is the longest option available in that area. And that's actually in Hiking Humboldt Volume 1. But it is also a very fascinating little different walk. It's an 8-mile loop for the more ambitious. Another walk that people often overlook is Humboldt Botanical Garden. And I just love the botanical garden. Is any time of the year they've got things in bloom, but it's particularly nice when we start to hit rhodie season, which is definitely now, and azalea season. This was obviously dogwood season in early May. The picture before was daylilies. There is an admission fee, an advantage, slight advantage if you're over 60. And it's not open on Mondays and Tuesdays. So be aware of that. You can get as much as a 2.5-mile walk on the walking paths, and there is a short ADA accessible route through the ornamental terrace garden. So a lot of reasons to take advantage of this nearby resource. Some pictures from the roadie. Oh, it's just outstanding. Definitely a worthwhile trip. All right, redwoods. I'm not going to pick many of the redwood walks, but I want to pick a couple to highlight, and especially during trillium season, which is right now. It's sort of on the tail end of trillium season in many places. So one of them, this is really a place where I encourage you, if you don't already, to use hiking poles because of the route issue. The West Ridge is a great place for trillium in late April, early May, maybe a little later this year. And then in late May and June, you start to get the rhododendrons, the wild rhododendrons in that area. It's about a 5-mile loop. It's a great place to see some of the most amazing trillium blooms I've ever seen. And this is the West Ridge Trail. This is the West Ridge west of Prairie Creek. And some of the amazing trillium that are to be seen. I'll talk about an easier option locally in just a moment. But then another option that I find fascinating and nice and flat, an easy one, is the Drury Cheney Groves, and that's hike number 65 in the book. Definitely one worth considering, and I included, while you're down in that area, possibility of going to visit the albino, one of the few examples of an albino redwood. This is what it looks like, and it's sort of in the Women's Federation Grove, and it's not signed, so you sort of have to find it a little bit on your own. I think I give a few hints in the book about how to find your way there. Oh, let's see. I want to mention, and I think maybe I included it later. I'll come back to an easy option for viewing Trillium right now. Bear River Ridge. This is a road walk. It's a 10-mile length of road that goes between Monument Road on this side that's up above Rio Dell and Scotia to oh, that's Monument Road on this side. This side is on the road that comes up, the Wildcat Road that comes up from Ferndale, right here, Mattole Road, sorry. Mattole Road there, Monument Road here. This is the upper Bear River Road that goes down towards Bear River. This is all county road. It's one lane, unpaved for the most part, except right around here, with some logical parking spots, views both directions in many cases. It's a 2,000-foot ridge line with magnificent views and green grass in the spring. And you just go up and park somewhere along the way, being somewhat attended to the private ownership. It's all open range, and enjoy a walk. It can be windy. This was the area that was proposed for the initial wind farm up in this area, so it can be windy, but it also is pretty amazing. I've seen everything from wild pigs up there to deer and a lot of other turkeys. So it's sort of an amazing place. A view from the high Bear River Ridge area. And what the road walking looks like in that area. And again, it's open range, so I don't encourage you to take dogs because the landowners hate to have you having a dog that would run off after cows or sheep, and that would tick them off more than anything. So if you're going to take a dog, be sure that he's on a leash. And a view out over Scotia and Rio Dell from the east side of that road. And in the distance, you see a little bit of the high Lassic peaks and some of the mountains to the east of us. Okay, I want to mention, it's going to be a little later this year, but up to Horse Mountain, this is going to be a June walk at the earliest. But there's some amazing wildflowers in the Cold Springs area. Again, Cold Springs is hike 86 in the book, and the Horse Mountain areas in the hike's 85. And Horse Mountain's a little more free range. They're not marked in any way, so you want to use the book carefully. And Cold Springs, I call it a wonder. This is a picture taken from Split Rock area of Cold Springs, and area down into the Redwood Creek Valley. From there, it's pretty amazing springtime countryside with wildflowers. It's grazed heavily later in the summer, but earlier, it's before the cattle come and graze in this area. So I call it a wonder. And Cold Springs itself is off Forest Service 1. There's a parking area. There's a fenced-in spring. There are no formal trails, but there are a lot of people that go out and rock climb, as you can see at Split Rock. So there's a fairly well-established trail here. But I like the area just as what I call a wonder, to go and wander some of the areas. You can't get too lost if you can't get lost by using the steep downhill on the west side, there is a marshy fin on the north side. There's Forest Service 1 on the east side. And then on this side is again a drop off and sort of a meadow and a old camping area. So it sort of has this walk boundaries that are, I think, very help you make sure that you're not going to get too far astray. This is not a terribly big area. It's probably about a mile at the most from one end to the other, and probably about a third to half a mile at the most from this end to this end. Some amazing flowers and blooming up there. Azalea options. Azaleas are soon to come into bloom. They tend to be a little later than the trillium. There are a few that I want to highlight. The easiest one for most of us living around Humboldt Bay is the Azalea State Nature Preserve. No dogs permitted. This is a very small, two very small little loop trails. It's just 2 miles east of 101 on the North Bank Road. And you turn left on Azalea Avenue and park is day use only. These are some pictures from that particular area. And then that's hike number 20. And then Stagecoach Hill, which is up north of Big Lagoon, is hike number 12. And it's just a short walk, although you can extend it by walking along cane roads, but the azaleas are concentrated in this area. And it's marked off of Cane Road on 101, and you just take a left turn, and it's poorly signed, but it is signed. One last one I really want to mention too is the Sequoia Park Zoo. This is a picture of the ADA portion of the canopy walk. And be aware that from the zoo, there is a charge. Cindy Chesborough, using the ADA accessible elements of this trail. It also has a portion that's non-ADA accessible, but it gets you up into the canopy at Sequoia Park. It also gives you access to the zoo with its amazing otter exhibit, the river otter exhibit, the bald eagle exhibit, and soon to be the black bear exhibit, which I think all of which makes it worth an extra trip to the Sequoia Park Zoo. So here are some of the prices. It's closed on Mondays, but great place to go visit. It's not cheap, but it's, if you haven't done it yet, to go do it. And as I mentioned, the black bear and the coyote exhibit will be open summer 2023. There are a few accessible trails I just want to highlight for those of you that for whom might take advantage, and a couple things that are sort of special. This is just recently opened up. It's at the north parking lot for Clam Beach. The county has put out this mat. It's a permanent mat that allows you on a wheelchair to get out to where the sands can be harder. It's even easier if you have access to this, which is available, a challenge, but it's available through county, through Sumag Village, through let's see, Friends of the Dunes has one. And this is a wonderful new resource. Another one that exists, this is my wife Amy with her parents out above Huda Point. And it's again sort of this kind of a ADA accessible, wheelchair friendly mat. Well worth, if you have people in your lives that would love to get a little bit of a sense, but normally wouldn't be able to. These are great resources to be aware of. And the state parks, I want to highlight as doing a much more impressive job of making trails accessible to their standards of ADA, which means hard packed surface, limits to the amount of rise and fall of the trail, and with turnarounds and other obstacles on trails. tried to do a good job of maintaining those kinds of trails in a number of the local state parks. Okay, what's next? Number of others that I haven't talked about: an evening walk around Potawat Freshwater Farms Nature Reserve is a 7/10 of a mile one-way walk. Great as things start to dry up a little bit for a nice evening. Some of these other things that I haven't included just for issues around time is the Maple Creek Loop, south side of Elk River Trail, many more. And I usually pitch urban walks, which are still good, but I don't. And also like Lax Creek, it's still great. Pine Ridge, that's a bear imprint from that walk. And you can check in on that in Hiking Humboldt and get a little bit more information. So this is the one I thought I'd placed it differently, but I didn't. I just yesterday was up at the Humboldt Area Foundation offices off of 101 and sort of the break cutoff. This is, they have a wonderful trillium bloom. It's not as good this year as it often is, but this was taken yesterday from there. It's just about a third of a mile loop and a great place just to go out for a quick evening stroll. There's only one permanent accessible parking spot, but it's definitely worth sort of a go out and see. All right, I'm getting close to the end. Ways to give back. I want to really plug something that I've given the last 12 years of my life to, which is the Volunteer Trail Stewards. We have a number of locations, and I have to say that some of our best volunteers are people that are over 50 and often retired, and we have levels of involvement and commitment, but most of these areas have a work day once a month. You can go on to humtrails.org for details and sign up and join us for one of the work days. The Humboldt Bay Trail Fund is another way that you can contribute. We have raised over $500,000 to support, in particular, the Bay Trail Fund and the Bay Trail and volunteer efforts to maintain and support the Bay Trail, to do emergency repairs and other kinds of things. You can donate through the Humboldt Area Foundation. Again, through local initiative, we have raised over $500,000 to support the Bay Trail. The final 4.2 miles are being constructed, so it's a very exciting time to again refocusing our attention on the Bay Trail and its long-term needs. So think about that again, as it's going to be foremost in our minds over the next couple of years. And my latest project, which should be available actually later this week, is done in conjunction with Humboldt First 5 and Backcountry Press, is a 192-page book in both English and Spanish simultaneously, focusing on 25 local walks for families with young children. Hiking Humboldt Kids, and this is the cover of that book.
You have a couple comments in the chat, if that's okay.
All right, yes, this is a good time for questions. So let's see, pull up my chat. I'll start from the bottom up, maybe. Okay, so I talked about Hiking Humboldt. It is available in local bookstores. I should say that all of my proceeds go to support the Humboldt Bay Trail Fund, which has been pretty darn close to $5,000 at this point, which is fantastic, but that's the book. Hiking Humboldt, Volume 2 in particular. A short, easy walk to see old growth redwoods. The most accessible is Lady Bird Johnson Grove. The first short bit of that is a little bit tougher. My second choice, without the tough first part, would be go to the Prairie Creek Redwoods Visitor Center and hike the Prairie Creek Trail. And it's, again, both of those are accessible to ADA state park standards. So it's decent for a wheelchair, especially one with the little larger wheels on it. Let me see, I need to go back through the chat. All right, plant sale plug, annual plant sale this weekend. And let's see. Intimidating signs. Yes, they are intimidating, and some of the people are not particularly friendly. I have to say that the legalization of marijuana has helped a great deal. But I think there are reasons not to be too bold and somewhat cautious, because there are aggressive and crazy people in the backcountry. So be careful, but know your rights. Know that these are roads supported by the county and you as a taxpayer. So yes, I think every reason to be somewhat. England Marine has free tide books. Let's see. I think that should cover it unless there are new questions. Oh,
There's a new one. Just wonder if your ear to the ground may know of any efforts any open space land, grasslands in Neelan?
I am not, Wendy. I'm not aware of any of that. The grasslands up there mostly are private, and some are owned by large ranch and owners. The only area that's generally public would be the airport itself, but I'm not sure I'd recommend you walking on the runway and in that area. But the road goes right through open range, so that's not a bad thing. There are a number of large ranches in that area, that some of which I know are have conservation easements, but those do not include public access.
Are there
Well,
any other questions?
yeah, if there are no other questions, thank you so much. Get out and walk, take advantage of our wonderful spring weather when it returns. And again, thank you so much for your support and being a part of this.
And thank you for all the work you do and for producing books, among others, for kids that's coming out. Can't wait to see it. And I want to remind everyone that on May 8th, Josh Buck will be talking about the Clark Historical Museum, past and present. And I think he's going to talk about a railroad display that they've also had. And I think you'll enjoy it. So we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks so much for supporting the OLLI Bound Bag program.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks, everyone.
And thank you, Rees.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.